12th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting. I am Blandy Miller, Chair of the Commission, and I would ask everyone to please be efficient in your comments and avoid redundancy so that we can hear from as many viewpoints on as many cases as possible today. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda. There is one item on consent today, CP 623 at Blue Run Lane and Pine Drive. The applicant has requested a deferral until our March 26th regular meeting so that this item can appear on the same agenda as its associated rezoning case. Do we have any discussion on the consent agenda? Do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I did. Yes. Thank you. Moving on to committee reports, we have 3 items today. The first 2 items are from our Text Change Committee, and I will turn to our Text Change Committee Chair, Nicole Bennett, for that report.
Thank you, Chair Miller. The Text Change Committee met on February 21st and discussed 2 agenda items. The first, TC 323 Clean Transportation Ordinance would amend the UDO by requiring electric vehicle infrastructure in the following uses and building types: apartments, hotels, standalone parking, and vehicle fuel sales. The requirement is that 20% of any parking spaces be EV capable, meaning served by a conduit and adequate electrical panel capacity. Prohibiting new drive-throughs in the following zoning districts: DX, OX, and any district with an urban frontage. Requiring, with new development, pedestrian connections to greenways, pedestrian connections from cul-de-sacs and dead ends, pedestrian connections in cases where exemptions to full street requirements exist or are created with zoning conditions or plan development applications. We heard a staff report and comments from the public. The committee recommended that Planning Commission request a 60-day extension so we can more fully address these changes. So there's no discussion. I'd like to have, request that Planning Commission ask for a 60-day extension from council.
Second. All those in favor, or any further discussion? None? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I need to recuse myself from this next item due to the fact that my residence is located within the study area.
Thank you very much. Without objection, Commissioner O'Haver is recused from this next item.
The next item, TC 723 Mordecai NCOD, was brought forward by a member of the public. The text change proposes amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance that would modify the existing NCOD for the Mordecai neighborhood, including both Conservation District 1 and Conservation District 2. It introduces a minimum 10-foot separation requirement between principal buildings to also include the following building elements: covered porch, covered stoop, bay window, and vestibule. The proposed text change would also introduce a maximum 5-foot front yard encroachment for the following building elements: covered porches and covered stoops. At the second text change committee, the applicant proposed to further reduce the primary street setback encroachment of those building features down from 5 feet to 0 and include bay windows and vestibules in this restriction. After hearing from staff, the applicant, and members of the public, the committee unanimously recommended denial of this text change. Committee members expressed concerns related to the process by which a change could be made to the NCOD compared to the more robust process for creating the NCOD, particularly as it relates to engagement of the overall community. Members also expressed concerns about the impact of implementing this text change to other property owners in the NCOD. Excuse me. Third, members expressed concern that this text change seemed inconsistent with the overall vision and goals of the comprehensive plan. So if there are no questions or further discussion, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 12, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend denial of the zoning text amendment. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because it does not align with the built environmental characteristics that reflect the predominant representation of lots within the Mordecai neighborhood and could work against the goals of providing additional housing and housing types.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion or debate on the merits of this motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously 7-0. Thank you very much.
And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Chair Bennett. Moving on to the third item on our under committee reports. This item is from the Committee of the Whole, rezoning case Z4023 at 13120 Strickland Road, which was placed in the Committee of the Whole due to the fact that the staff report deemed it inconsistent with both the comprehensive plan and the future land use map.
Chair Miller, excuse me. I need to recuse from this item.
Yes, without objection, there are two members that need to recuse. Could you please state for the record the reason? We've done it in the committee, but not at the full commission.
Sure, my firm is part of the development team.
Thank you.
My firm is supporting the development team.
Thank you very much. Without objection, the two commissioners are recused. So moving on to this item, since our Committee of the Whole meeting, the applicant has submitted signed revised conditions. So I will turn to staff for a brief presentation focusing on the updates since our last committee meeting.
Hello, everybody. Sean Stewart, Planning and Development. The case before you is rezoning case Z4023 concerning the property at 13120 Strickland Road. The request is to rezone this from 16.25 acres to from R4 with conditions, the Shot 1 overlay, as well as the Falls Watershed Protection Overlay District, to R10 with conditions with the Shot overlay and Shot 1 overlay and the Falls Watershed Protection Overlay District. The Planning Commission deadline for action is March 25th, which would make today the day that you would have to take action on this item, unless you would ask for an extension. The summary of the proposed conditions with the changes as of March 8th, but the conditions were assigned, it's turned in, so this is what we're talking about today. The property owner, the first condition, the property owner will maintain that all residential units be affordable for a period of 30 years, earning no more than, for residents earning no more than 80% of the area median income. There should be a minimum building setback of 50 feet from the shared boundary line with the properties along the eastern border of the property line. The property shall maintain a type B1 protective yard as defined in the UDO section 7.24 along that shared boundary line of the eastern properties. And the main the main change with condition number 4, if you remember, is the condition about the block perimeters. The main change here is that there should be no vehicular connection that shall be made from the subject property to the existing Saxon Way, though only a sidewalk shall be required to connect to the existing sidewalk along Saxon Way. Number 5, the subject to the approval of the City of Raleigh Department of Transportation, and that sidewalk connection to the existing sidewalk on Leesville Town Center entrance driveway closest to the subject property shall be constructed along Strickland Road, providing that the portion of the sidewalk located off the subject property can be constructed with the Strickland Road right-of-way. Number 6, state the same. The post-development stormwater discharge peak flow rate from the property shall not exceed the pre-development peak flow rate for the 2, 10, and 25-year storms. The UDO section 9-5-2D1BI shall be applied to the property as if it said nitrogen and phosphorus loads contributed by the proposed new development activity may not exceed the unit area mass loading rates as follows. A, nitrogen, 2 pounds. Impervious surface shall be limited to 28.5% of the subject property. Buildings and parking shall be set back at least 50 feet from the right-of-way of Strickland Road. And the percentage of tree conservation area acquired on the on the property pursuant to section UDO 9-1-3A-1 shall be increased from 10% to 20%. This request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. It is inconsistent with the future land use map, however, consistent with the urban form map, which is the parkway identified because of the 540 that is near. Outstanding issues, once again, consistency could be reduced by limiting the density of the request. The deadline for action is March 25th. Again, that would make today the day of required action, unless you would ask City Council for a extension.
Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment, we have already received over 3 hours of public comment and discussion on this case over the course of 2 committee meetings. But today, given that the applicant has submitted new revised conditions without objection, I would like to reopen public comment. But just so I can get a sense, by show of hands, is there anyone here to speak on the proposed changes to this case? Or any other members of the public who would like to speak in this case that did not previously have the opportunity at the committee meetings? Okay. Yes. In that case, I would like to allow an additional 6 minutes for both sides to speak. And I'd ask the speakers to focus on the new revised conditions and any updates and changes to this case that have not previously been discussed. And we will start with the applicant and those in favor of this case.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Beth Trejos with Fox Rothschild here in support of the proposed rezoning. I have with me Noah Wagner. Noah is with Oppidan, the contract purchaser of this property, and he would like to talk you through the changes that we have made in response to the comments that we heard from you at 2 meetings of the Committee of the Whole.
Hello, members of the Planning Commission. As Beth said, my name is Noah Wagner. I'm the developer for this project. Thank you for providing us with another opportunity to come in front of you today. The biggest item from the previous Planning Commission meetings, as we understood them, were our site's impact to the Falls Lake watershed and any precedents that it may set. I plan to spend most of our time addressing those 2 items, but first I wanted to address a couple minor follow-up items. First, the neighbors had presented a contract that we were responsible for maintaining the stormwater discharge from the shopping center in the previous meeting. We've looked into that, and we have determined that it is not relevant to the property that we are acquiring, and we are not encumbered by anything of the sort on this parcel. Second, we have continued to work with Raleigh staff regarding the pedestrian connection to Leesville Town Center, and we have fine-tuned that language to align with their recommendations. That language was submitted after Sean had completed his PowerPoint. Another item that we have revised within our rezoning conditions, our affordability level is at an average of 60% of AMI or lower, whereas I noticed that Sean's referenced the 80% number that we previously had. All right. So to turn your attention to the screen here, this is a table with 3 columns. Those 3 columns represent the previous R1 zoning, the current R4 zoning, as well as the proposed R10 zoning. All of these stormwater requirements are on the left-hand side of the screen. Any cell colored that darker green color represents an improvement from the UDO standards and from the single-family standards as it is zoned today. As you can see from this project, this is what we have presented already, but we are doubling our tree conservation area, limiting our stormwater quality in nitrogen and phosphorus down 10%, and we are retaining to the 25-year attenuation amount. Now, Commissioner Fox made a request in the last meeting to also reduce our impervious to that below of a single-family development, and we took that as a sincere challenge. We are now limiting our impervious to 28.5%. Now, this following table just has all those requirements on one slide. You can see that this is a very significant change, as limiting our impervious to 28.5% thus decreases the amount of stormwater runoff we will have as part of the project. And that lesser amount of stormwater will then have double the amount of opportunity to attenuate into the site with the double amount of tree conservation. It will be treated more heavily to remove nitrogen and phosphorus than a single-family development would, and we are more than doubling our stormwater retention on the site. You can see that we are meeting or exceeding every quantifiable stormwater restriction, and we are committing to far less overall stormwater impacts than a single-family project would. Now, I'm going to have to go through this a little bit quicker than I would like to, but we did a lot of research on the precedence of multifamily within the Falls Lake watershed. And we have done a lot of research through NCDEQ, North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. NCDEQ makes recommendations for how much density and how much impervious is allowed in these different categorizations of water supply watershed that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. In our research, we have found that Durham has been allowing multifamily within the watershed to date. This is an example up on the screen, Briar Green Apartments. It was built 10 units to the acre, and it is over 45% impervious. And one other example in Wake Forest, this was built in 2017. It is over 40% impervious, and it is over 11 units to the acre. The reason why I share these is because they are both in the Falls Lake watershed, and NCDEQ classifies these projects as the exact same as our Strickland Road site, which means NCDEQ has allowed projects in areas that we are classified in to go up to 70% impervious area on projects in the past. We are not making any exceptions. We are not changing any precedents as part of this project. Now, I see we're running out of time, so I will wrap it up here. I want to bring it back to where we started. This is an affordable housing project in North Raleigh. This area has incredible access to community and commercial amenities. The perception of this case has changed so drastically different from the reality of it. We are providing affordable housing in North Raleigh in an area that lacks it. We have decreased our stormwater footprint to that below of a single-family development, and we are not setting any new multifamily precedent. We have our development team present to answer questions as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to the opposition. Anyone opposed to this case, those opposed to this case will have a total of 6 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself. I see we have one speaker. Do we have anyone else today? Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for your time. I'm Grant Smith. I am just a neighbor in the area. And today I have in front of me the Stormwater Advisory Commission report, which I think everybody has. Sean, do you have a copy of that? Was it presented for the notes? So they met last week. So the stormwater is, in short, this is top environmental folks from private sector that the city has brought together to represent the city's interest. And they work for private companies, they work for consultants, and they are undoubtedly the best experts, not only in the region, but in the country. And based on that report from last week, they very clearly state that rezoning this parcel in the current zoning R10 sets a precedence for approval of other rezonings in the secondary watershed areas that also do not adhere to the comprehensive plan for protection of protected areas. To best protect current public and private adjacent and downstream property, city infrastructure, and to minimize future cost of stream restoration and repair, it is in the best interest of the council to reject this proposal. So this is not me, this isn't conjecture, this is the committee that you've asked to advise on how we move forward with this. And in their conclusion, they basically state that this is somewhat offensive in the way that they have pitted environmental concerns and affordable housing. This would be like asking two of your children to fight each other to see who wins. This is not a winning proposition. We have to figure out the appropriate location for this affordable housing development. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of where. So, with that, I would certainly leave this back in the hands. Another one of your advisory commissions that have credentials that are absolutely stellar have spoken. This report is in everyone's hands. So here we are. Again, their conclusion is very clear. We should not move forward with this. It doesn't meet criteria. And in spite of the charts that were presented as compliant or will meet criteria for current demand. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition of this case? Then seeing none, we will bring it back to the table for additional discussion. I might like to kick us off. I know there is one outstanding question about the precedents in this area. I believe Raleigh Water might have had a reply to or a response to just some of the facts related to whether this type of case has already been occurred in our water supply watershed areas. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Ed Buckingham with Raleigh Water. We just found out about the other areas in the watershed yesterday, so we've been researching that. We can't really speak for Durham, but according to our internal watershed map, the one in Wake Forest is not in the Falls Lake watershed. It's right on the edge. But I'm trying to confirm that right now just to confirm it's very close. And we're doing some more research into that, and I will hopefully have something later on today about that particular property.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I would like to open it up for other discussion on this case. Do any commissioners want to kick us off? Yes, Commissioner Peeler.
I have a question for staff. In talking about the tree conservation area, I appreciate the applicant doubling that. I was trying to read about in our UDO about tree conservation, and it seemed to me that in section 919, which is watershed protection overlay districts, that this would be a watershed protection overlay district, correct? In there, it specifies that there should be 40% tree conservation. So I'm curious why that doesn't apply in this case.
Question, Sean's coming up.
My understanding is the 40% is forestation, which can be replanted, is my understanding, but is someone here from forestry? My understanding is it doesn't have to be preserved. It's something that could be replanted. The tree conservation area is just that. You have to conserve the trees that are there at the time it's established.
Any additional feedback from those at the podium on this topic? No.
Not staff, but I do a lot of work in the Falls Lake Watershed Overlay Protection District. So it's 40% forestation, 10% tree conservation area. That 10% TCA, or tree conservation area, can count towards your forestation area requirement.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions and comments from the commission?
Thanks, Chair Miller. Question for Raleigh Water regarding the data that we received from the applicant says that if this project goes forward, the impacts on this development, the site would actually be less than what would be entitled currently. It's my understanding the study from Raleigh Water indicates that any increase in density is a major concern for development on sites within a secondary watershed. So if somebody from Raleigh Water could kind of speak to density versus the current data that we've received from the applicant, I think it'd be helpful.
So I think that, our position is that any of these rules, whether they're in the Falls Lake watershed, the Little River watershed, Swift Creek watershed, they all look to density as a way to protect water quality. There's other aspects that are also important. One of those is impervious surface. But density, I think, was the original one that the state of North Carolina used back in the 70s when they developed watershed classifications. And we still believe that holds true today, that the less density, the less dwelling units, the better you're going to have a water quality outcome. So that's still our position, and you know, we have similar density restrictions in those other watersheds I referenced. And so whenever you decide to change that policy in one watershed, you're going to have to consider that in other watersheds as well. So that's another one of our concerns.
Thank you. I will just note for the record that the guidance is per APFL 1 and 2 that development should not exceed 1 unit per acre for FL1 or 4 per acre under the UDO conservation development standards. So that is in line with what you're saying in terms of density.
Correct.
Okay. But these are just guides. They're not true codes. So it's okay.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, yes. So to summarize a lot of what we've been hearing at the committee, and from the public and also from the experts and from the applicant, basically all the aspects of watershed protection that are governed by the UDO have either been met or improved upon in this case, both as compared to the existing entitlement and as compared to the R1, which was previous and is recommended by the comprehensive plan. You know, those things including impervious surface, tree conservation, nitrogen and phosphorus limits, and stormwater retention. So, however, the comprehensive plan does include a policy that density also matters. And we have, even though it's not in the UDO, and we've consulted with, or I have, spoken, and we've worked at the committee to consult with the experts from Raleigh Water, from Raleigh Stormwater, and from our Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, that all feel strongly that the density limitations are critically important for this watershed area. So right now we're grappling with a case where it meets the standards of the UDO or improves upon them versus the existing entitlement. But our experts are telling us perhaps that's not enough, and there should be more stringent and safeguards within this watershed protection area. And it sounds like this is an issue that that the development community, that neighbors, that landowners in the area would all appreciate a meaningful amount of clarity on, not only on this case, but moving forward as well. So I think we need to work on this case, but I would also probably include in my recommendation a request from council to authorize a text change to look at the existing watershed or water supply watershed protections within the UDO and have our staff work with our experts to see if those are not stringent enough and if they need to be improved upon, and specifically if the density requirement needs to be codified within our UDO and not just included within our comprehensive plan guidance, policy guidance. So it's a tough case because the applicant is following or exceeding, or improving upon all of the rules that we have set out for them. But our experts across the board are saying that this might not be enough. I think that we can address that issue with a text change for future cases, and would very much like to. But the issue is, what do we do with this case? And I'm curious if commissioners have further thoughts on that. Yes, Commissioner Haber.
As I've commented before, the environmental issues are really the ones that I'm focused on, and don't take those lightly. I understand the sort of the struggle here between policy, UDO requirements, and the policy on density. It seems like the SMAC has made some recommendations to improve upon this case, and so my question to the applicant is, would they be willing to consider these recommendations that go even further above and beyond what they are proposing? And my question to my fellow commissioners would be, would this be enough to tip the scales towards the UDO requirements versus policy if the main concern is environmental? I totally understand the concerns. I'm sort of saddened that we're here, that we're struggling this hard to try to find a way to provide some meaningful, affordable housing in the area. So I would like to continue to try to find a way to, again, balance the environmental concerns with the need for affordable housing. The gentleman in opposition said the question is not when it is, it's where it is. There are no good sites left. Site development is very cost prohibitive. Affordable housing is very tough to obtain. And we have an opportunity here to provide some meaningful, affordable housing. So my question to the applicant, and I'm not sure that this will tip the scales for my fellow commissioners, but would you be willing to consider the additional recommendations from SMAC that are pretty detailed to try to continue this conversation before we make a recommendation?
We received the recommendation from SMAC sort of mid-afternoon yesterday. We were not invited to the SMAC meeting. We had heard some discussion that SMAC might be looking at this issue. I looked carefully at their agenda on Thursday. This item was not on the agenda. Apparently, it was handled under a liaison report item, which just didn't give us the notice that we needed to participate. So we were not involved with SMAC. We're disappointed we were not included in the discussion as the applicant and the group with the most knowledge about the site. We would share with you that we think there's some pretty serious inaccuracies in the report with regard to our site. But we have asked SMAC to engage with us and to allow us to continue to discuss with them the realities of this site, existing regulations, and we are willing and able to do that. Unfortunately, we have used up our opportunity to amend our conditions here at the Planning Commission based on the input that we received from the Committee of the Whole at their last meetings. If we had, had known that this was going to come up, we might have chosen a different path, but unfortunately, I don't think we can make any changes here before the Planning Commission.
They've had their bite at the apple.
Yeah, I know, but
Your deadline.
yeah, I
means you would need to
understand,
ask
but
for an
I thought at Committee of the Whole we suggested to the applicant
That was
to
the first discussion at Committee of the Whole.
Yes, Commissioner Peeler.
Can we make a motion to allow them another chance? Is that possible?
No, you can't set aside the rules of the Unified Development Ordinance. You can make in your recommendation to council, you can make advisory remarks about additional changes you might like to see to the case.
Additional thoughts from the commission? In that case, I'd like to entertain a motion.
do want to ask one more question
Please.
of water staff.
Yes.
Something that I'm grappling with in this case is the density piece. And I know that's from the 70s. It's a long time ago where they set that aside, and that's generally accepted as an important piece of why stormwater issues with this site are what they are. However, being that the applicant has improved the impervious conditions to above and beyond what is required if it was developed with single family, which I would point out it can be developed like tomorrow with 20 single family homes with 30% impervious. How does, what I'm not understanding is how the density makes that worse if the impervious is better. I think that's a part that I'm grappling with as not a stormwater or nutrient expert.
Should have sat closer to this table. So, you know, what we would say is there are other things that impact water quality other than just impervious surface. When you have higher density, you tend to have higher secondary cumulative impacts. That can be brake dust from vehicles, that can be exhaust from vehicles, it can be a lot of different things that are hard to quantify. But you know, I'll give you an extreme example. Let's say we use the city of Asheville's North Reservoir. It's surrounded by natural forest. They do very little in water treatment for that particular drinking water source because it's surrounded by forest and it functions wonderfully. And we still believe that if you look around the Falls Lake watershed, just north of Strickland Road, I actually live there. And a lot of those properties that are across the street from me have large lots, 1 acre, and there's a house, and they can go up to 30% impervious, but the ones that I'm familiar with, for instance, are not there. And they have no curb and gutter, they have grass swales, and our contention is that sort of yard, grass swales, and the ditches functions better to filter water than a constructed SCM. So, and that's, you know, really what the whole policy was for the Falls Lake watershed. You know, the city of Raleigh opted not to extend services in there in a very general sense. We have done it in a few cases, namely to rescue failing wells and septic systems. But Wake County also supported our request. This is probably back in the 80s when the lake was constructed to limit density. And it's been, in our eyes, an effective tool. As I've said multiple times, if it was just up to me personally, Falls Lake would look like the Asheville watershed and be surrounded by forest. But that's not the case. So failing that, we would prefer single-family homes, an acre lot. And our idea is that is going to provide better overall watershed protection. And but none of this is, you know, codified. You know, I'm not. You know, it's not the UDO that gets into secondary cumulative impacts, and the applicant has been, very put a lot of effort into trying to reduce their impacts through what they're proposing. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ben? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Mr. Brown?
The density piece just goes back to the more people you put into a watershed, the water quality is gonna just degrade by having more people in there and more development in there. That's sort of like a water quality core principle going back to the 70s. Now, impervious area is also a way to kind of mitigate that, but it's another tool in the toolbox is kind of how I would say it. But I agree with everything Ed said, and except for maybe the whole forest would be, no, I'm just kidding.
Yes, Mr. Hess.
I would just point out that this portion of the watershed, this crescent area that is between 540 and Strickland Road, has been treated historically differently by the City Council. This piece in particular, not only is it adjacent to 540, it's right next to a shopping center. You know, there's a shopping center across the street. This is already an intensely populated area with lots of cars traversing this area. there are utilities stubbed to this site already. In utilities, as we showed you at the committee of the whole meeting, we showed you that map of the whole crescent that showed sewer lines, because that's what we can show on the GIS, throughout that crescent area. And we shared with you that the City Council's policy on annexation allows the acceptance of annexation petitions where there is adjacent city utilities. So that is unique and different about this small portion of the watershed that's in that crescent. And what we submit to you is that our zoning proposal is a good interim measure that does protect the environment, recognizes the unique circumstances of this site, and provides the public benefit of affordable housing with a maximum of 80% AMI and an average of 60% AMI, which is sorely needed in this area where the historic watershed policies have resulted in almost exclusively million-dollar homes. So we believe we have shown a significant public benefit, and we would ask for your support.
Thank you very much. Other comments from the commissioners? I understand. We're holding it at the table for right now without objection, though if you would like to respond to that comment, that's fine, but we'll have to limit additional public comment to that.
Yeah, just quickly, I know Beth had mentioned that she did not have the ability to participate with the Stormwater Advisory Commission, and that's because never in their history have they made a recommendation on a single rezoning case. So I think that clearly outlines the importance to the environment of this case that the Stormwater Advisory Committee and the experts on that case felt compelled to have this discussion at their meeting. That's why it probably wasn't on the agenda. So I just wanted that to be noted that, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission and its liaison and our liaison, Commissioner Otwell, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, for working on this case. I've worked with I've spoken with some on the on the commission, and I've sort of explained that given that their lack of typically dealing with some of these cases, one of the issues that we're dealing with here that sort of is indirectly addressed in the SMAC report. The SMAC report itself seems to compare the current development pattern to the proposed entitlement, whereas at the Planning Commission, we have to compare the existing entitlement to the proposed. And so issues about sort of existing stormwater treatment devices and those items that are not regulated by the existing entitlement are things that are not typically part of our the tools in our tool belt, and things that we can regulate with a new proposed rezoning case. So any other questions from the commissioners, or anyone have a motion?
I don't have any questions. I just want to make a comment, and I appreciate the innovative conditions that the applicant has came with. I really appreciate the idea of having affordable housing, not just in East Raleigh, but throughout the city. However, I am also considering all of the things that I've heard about stormwater, and we just got hit with a SMAC report today that we really hadn't had a time to delve into as a committee or a commission. We also heard about two cases in Durham and in Wake Forest that attribute to the Falls Lake watershed, and they are more intense from what we've heard than what is being proposed. I'd like to get more information on the case in Durham. We did not have a chance to really look at that. Also, and I heard some conflict in information about the case in Wake Forest, that it was on the edge of the Falls Lake watershed, or it may or may not be in to the Falls Lake watershed, so I'd like to hear some more information on that. So basically, what I'm saying is that we are running out of time to hear this case or to make a decision on this case, and we've just been hit with a few other facts about this case that we have had not time to really divulge and really to get into. So I'm for affordable housing. I'm for all of the innovative aspects of this case. I love it, but we just are not at a position in time to really make a an informed decision on this case. So maybe we should move this forward out of the planning commission just to city council. I'll make a motion to move it to city council without a recommendation based off of these things that we've heard. We have not had enough time to really jump into these two cases in Durham and in Wake Forest, and also this SMAC letter that we just got. I just hadn't had time to look at it and really make an informed decision on what that really means to this case.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Now, also, I wanted to say one other thing too. In committee of the whole a couple weeks ago, I made a comment to study all of the affordable housing projects in not just the Falls Lake watershed, but all watersheds throughout the city. And I didn't see any information about that today in the committee report or the commission or the staff report. So that's something that I'd like to look at maybe in strategic planning or strategic planning committee to see of all of the projects that we talked about, how do we overlay that onto the watersheds in the city.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
If I could,
Oh, I was going to open it up for more discussion after that, but we can
I was
have it
going
now.
to ask him to rephrase his motion.
Okay.
Even though we're not making a recommendation, you should still adopt some consistency statement. And so
Okay.
if you could pull out one of the consistency statements, read it, and then where it says, and recommend approval or denial, just say, have no recommendation.
Okay, I move to recommend this case with no recommendation to the city council based on the consistency statement, consistent with urban form map. I don't know the policy number, but Parkway is what was referenced in the staff report. Is that?
Friendly amendment, maybe.
Okay.
I believe what you had said was you had observed that it was inconsistent with the majority of policies in the comprehensive plan, but consistent with policies related to housing.
Yes, housing and urban form, yes.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second or
I'd also-
additional discussion before a second?
Additional discussion, maybe a friendly amendment. I'd like to also ask that council consider the 6 points from the SMAC report that we received on Monday, March 11th. No page number, but there's 6 bullet points that they considered to add or have the applicant consider.
Thank you.
I would just like to make, oh, you go ahead.
I know you caught me when I had to clear my throat. I also wonder if we can add, Chair Miller, as you had noted, the disconnect between the policy language and the regulatory language related to density in the watershed. If we could make that recommendation to council as well.
I plan on making a motion to approve a text change to that end as well.
All right, we can do that.
So if I may summarize when presenting this case to council, those reasons in favor of supporting this case is that this rezoning case meets or exceeds all aspects of the watershed protection governed by the UDO. In addition, it provides significant public benefit in the form of meaningful and substantial affordable housing project at 60% AMI in an area that desperately needs it, and that this crescent area is already intensely populated with utilities stubbed to the site. And the reasons opposed to this case is our experts at Raleigh Water, Stormwater, and the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission are telling us that the water supply watershed areas need protections beyond what's required in the UDO. And again, to that end, I would just say that the issue of precedence to me, even though it may be interesting to know what the others are doing, I think that the protection that we need for our water supply needs to be governed by a thoughtful weighing of the science and the needs for this. And if there is already precedence for doing something that is potentially damaging our water supply, that should not be what governs our rules for how to protect the water supply moving forward. So if there is no precedence for that, that would make Raleigh obviously a leader in building in the watershed. If there is already precedence for this, in my opinion, if it is in fact endangering our water supply, then this would make yet another piece of precedence that others would rely upon. So I think it's perhaps interesting, but if Raleigh wants to lead, is a leader with respect to its municipal neighbors, and we really want to lead in this area, and our experts are telling us that we need to codify additional protections and changes in the water supply areas, then I think we should just do that and not sort of hold up any individual rezoning case to litigate that specific issue on a case-by-case basis. So, we have additional discussion?
I would like to make one comment for the record before we do the motion. I just, as this goes to council and as they consider it, however they get it, this is a really tough case. We've said that over and over. The environmental, concerns are real for Falls Lake, obviously. I just want to make a point that we should not interpret environmental regulations differently based on the class of people who are living there. I want to reemphasize this lot can be developed tomorrow with 20 single-family homes with 30% impervious, no matter what happens here. And as we continue to bring up environmental regulations, I often hear them brought up where they are interpreted one way if there are people who can afford million-dollar homes, and they're interpreted a different way if there are low-income people there. And that's super concerning to me, and we should not interpret them that way. So I'd love that to be in the record and love that to be in there when we report it to council, and that's all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Haber.
Appreciate and agree with all of the comments that have been made by my fellow commissioners. I would like to add that as we're asking council to take a look at the difference between what's codified and what's policy, I want to make sure that the comments that were made by staff use words like tend to have higher secondary cumulative impacts, hard to quantify. We believe that this is the case. And so I don't want to make policy around feelings and tendencies. I would like it to be made on science per your comment. It is a little concerning that staff has mentioned a couple of times of personally what they would like to see in this area. That concerns me when we're talking about, again, very difficult cases. And so I have some concerns about that. I understand the comments that I believe the comment was typically single-family homes don't use 30%, but that's typical. To Reeves's point, 1 acre at 30% is 1 acre at 30%. So I understand that there's a tendency, there's some typicals, but it's not required, and so that causes me concerns. Understand, looking at Asheville, this isn't Asheville. It's adjacent to I-540. There's utility stub to the site. There has been a development pattern. So again, I'm not suggesting that we ignore the environmental impacts. I hope that council will allow the applicant to consider those recommendations from SMAC and have some meaningful conversation about if some of those bullets can be adopted, does it tip the scales on this struggle that we're having between density versus impervious, protecting the watershed, but also providing for our community a real need. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Additional comments, Commissioner Fox.
With the recommendations for additional pieces to the motion made by Commissioner Mann, articulated by Commissioner Raines and yourself, Chair Miller, I would be comfortable supporting his motion to recommend voting out with no recommendation.
Thank you. Is that a second?
That is a second.
Any additional discussion or debates on the merit of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much. I would also like to make a motion to request City Council authorize a text change for staff to work with our experts to review the water supply, watershed protections, and consider any additional changes that need to be made, including potentially limiting density in the water supply areas under the EDF.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I need further discussion or debates on the merits. All those in favor? Yes. Those opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, thank you. Moving on to old business. There are 2 items under old business today. For these items, the commission has already received a full staff presentation, applicant presentation, and heard from the public, and our focus today will be on any updates or changes to this case since our last meeting. The first item is rezoning case Z5123 at Buck Jones Road. This case is to change approximately 0.36 acres from NX3 with Transit Overlay District to CX3 with conditions. I will now turn to Matthew Burns for a brief presentation from staff focusing on any updates since our last meeting.
Good morning, Planning Commission members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. This case last appeared on the February 13th, 2024 agenda, and the applicant submitted revised conditions which add car wash to the list of prohibited uses and add a condition limiting hours of operations to 6 a.m. to midnight. The other conditions remain unchanged. And your deadline for action is March 25th. Just a reminder that this site is at the intersection of Bashford Road and Buck Jones Road. And the proposed conditions now more closely approximate the NX district and NX limited use standards. So the applicant added car wash to the list of prohibited uses. And they added a condition limiting hours of operations for vehicle fuel sales. The remaining conditions remain unchanged. So since the proposed conditions now more closely approximate the NX district, staff has revised the staff report and deemed the request consistent with the future land use map, its designation of neighborhood mixed use. The request is still largely inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and inconsistent with the urban form map. Again, LU 1.2, future land use map and zoning consistency, which was formerly inconsistent, is now a consistent policy, but the remaining inconsistent policies remain unchanged. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is March 25th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. We have already received public comment on this case, but just so I can get a sense, by show of hands, is anyone here today who wishes to speak on the proposed changes or any other aspect of this case not previously discussed? Oh, I see one. Anyone else? In that case, I'd like to open it up for an additional 5 minutes for both sides. We will start with the applicant and those in favor.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the Planning Commission. Worth Mills on behalf of Little Sioux Mini Mart. Don't have a lot to add to Matthew's presentation, but again, this is a request that would allow Little Sioux Mini Mart to restart its gasoline sales, which have been or were discontinued in 2010. The 2 conditions that we included since our last Planning Commission meeting were those 2 which Planning Commission wanted us to further address to make sure that this case was more consistent with the future land use map. We appreciate your input and the Planning Department's willingness to work with us to make this a request that is consistent with the NX future land use map designation. I'll note again, too, that there is a condition that would require a more urban style of development if this property were redeveloped for a non-vehicle fuel sales use. So there's, allowances for today and assurances for tomorrow as well. But again, appreciate your time and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of this case? Seeing none, we'll open it up for the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 5 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Any additional thoughts, questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I just want to first thank the applicant for the revised conditions and to say that I know one of the comments I made at the previous meeting when we heard this was about how this conflicts with the very essence of TOD and transit and what we're doing in this area. But I do think that one of the tenets of equitable TOD is to ensure that we aren't hurting small neighborhood-based businesses, and that we aren't forcing people for whom transit might not be feasible to drive elsewhere to get fuel for their vehicles. So I think there's a balance between allowing vehicle-oriented businesses and prohibiting them. We want successful transit and supported development, but we know the reality is that some people will need to drive and will choose to drive. I think the conditions offered here allow us to strike that balance, promote small neighborhood businesses, offer multimodal options, and respect the character of the surrounding development. And I will add that I live in a neighborhood that it's definitely not a transit-oriented neighborhood, but it has a neighborhood-based gas station. And I think it's fully embraced by the neighborhood. It adds to the neighborhood. We appreciate having it there. And I don't think anyone in the neighborhood would view it as detracting from the character of the neighborhood. I think it's a neighborhood asset. So I am supportive of this case with the revised conditions.
Thank you very much. Well said. Any other comments on this case? Seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett.
Can I interrupt you real quick before you make the motion?
You sure can.
If you're making a motion to recommend approval, if you would just read the draft motion without the second sentence.
Without the second sentence.
Without the second sentence.
Okay. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated March 12th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. This is rezoning case Z5423 at South Saunders Street. This case is to change approximately 0.36 acres from NX3 Urban Limited with TOD to RX7 Urban Limited with conditions and with the TOD. And we will now turn to staff for any updates since our last meeting.
Good morning, Planning Commission members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Similarly to the last case, this last appeared on the February 13th agenda, and the applicant submitted revised conditions. And your deadline for action is April 13th, 2024. Just a reminder, this is near the intersection of West South Street and South Saunders Street. And proposed conditions now include a height limit of 95 feet. And the other condition remains unchanged. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, future land use map, and urban form map. And again, deadline for action is April 13th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. We've already received public comment on this case, but so I can get a show of hands. Is there anyone today who wishes to speak on any new changes to the case or any other aspects we have not previously discussed? I see one. Anyone else? Well, in that case, we will reopen public comment and allot an additional 5 minutes for both sides.
Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the commission. Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson here on behalf of the property owners, as well as Blue Heron, which is the potential developer here. With me today is Jaron Johnson with Blue Heron. We did add this at the request of the Planning Commission, this height restriction. There is a, if you'll recall, the plan right now is to develop this entire parcel as a single development. That's at least what this is intended to facilitate. That adjoining parcel is 7 stories, which is what prompted the 7-story request. That adjoining parcel has a height limit of 85 feet. There is some topographic drop, so we asked for a 95-foot height limit just to make sure that the proverbial tail was not wagging the proverbial dog there, and that we had sufficient height on that smaller portion, because really what's going to drive the height is going to be on that larger portion at the corner of West South Street and South Saunders Street. If you have any questions, we're available.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in favor of this case? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment for the opposition. Those opposed have a total of 5 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. I'd like to thank the applicant for making those conditions and reopen public comment, noting that since changes have already been made, we have to vote on the case as it appears today.
Chair Miller, quick comment. The guidance is for 3 stories, but this area is growing and the flume is in X with higher density options. As noted, the adjacent project is 7 stories, so generally I approve and I'll be ready to make a motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Haber.
Yeah, I would just like to add, since I believe I was the one pushing mostly for that changed condition, revised condition, I want to thank the applicant for going back, taking a look at that. My concern was the 12 stories adjacent to residential, or the potential for that. I appreciate the limitation and knowing that there's some environmental conditions along the adjacent properties and they are vacant. I would fully support a motion for approval.
Thank you. Additional comment? Seeing none, you have Commissioner Peeler.
I just want to say, since this is in the TOD and the density bonus would apply, you know, I understand the adjoining property was rezoned to 7. However, that was done by a previous council and a previous planning commission. And we've talked about the density bonus many, many times here. And I would love to see affordable units in this building through our density bonus. And I think keeping it 3 still allows, not 7, but it allows additional height. And I think I'm going to be against this because I want to see affordable units in the building. I think we can get there through our density bonus.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to enter. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I just want to tag on to what Commissioner Reeves just said, because I'm having the same struggle. You know, we're not allowed to require applicants to use the density bonus or to include affordable units. The incentive is there. The request seems to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and other aspects, but it's a struggle for me because we continue to have this incentive that isn't being used. So whatever recommendation we choose to make to council, I would just ask that we note again and that we continue to note when there is a case that has the opportunity to use the density bonus or the FTDO or whichever one is applicable, and it's not used. And if there is some technical reason that it's not being used, that council investigate that and figure out why it's not being used. Because it seems like there are some cases, I guess, where the applicant doesn't want to use it or it's not financially feasible. But it seems like we've heard from applicants in the past when we've asked about them about some sort of technical issue that may be keeping them from using the density bonus. And if that's the case, we need to get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. We may have a case with that coming up soon. Any other comments on this case? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Chair Miller, for case Z5423, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated March 12, 2024, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-2. And Commissioner Lampman, is your reason the same as Commissioner Peeler's or something different?
Yeah, I think it's just to emphasize the importance of the TOD overlay and the intention of the height bonuses there. Thanks.
I'll note then for the record, because I will explain this if asked at council as well, so those opposed are emphasizing the importance of the TOD overlay district. Those in support are in support of this as a general land use. I'll also say the reason for my voting in support is we absolutely need subsidized and incentivized affordable housing. We also need housing products of different types across the board because those help relieve pressure for income levels and for housing types all across the board as well. So an additional reason why I'm voting in favor. Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to new business. These items have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, so we will hear a full staff presentation, an applicant presentation, and we will hear from the public. Moving on to item F1, Z4623 at North Boylan. This case is to change approximately 0.39 acres from OX3 detached frontage with the North Boylan Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District to OX12 urban limited frontage with conditions. And we will turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Planning Commission members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Yeah, this is approximately one half an acre. It's 3 parcels west of Glenwood Avenue, and your deadline for action is May 11th, 2024. Zoning in the area is mixed. There's office mixed use, commercial mixed use, and downtown mixed use with a range of heights and surrounding or close to the site, you have some institutional and office uses in North Boylan. You have St. Mary's School a little bit farther west. You have the Gramercy and some commercial development closer to Glenwood Avenue, and as well as Smoky Hollow northeast of the site. And this site is adjacent to Z26, which was approved earlier this year. So there are 3 existing businesses on site. There is a salon, a fitness studio, and vertical walls. And again, it's kind of nestled between the Z26 site, which was just rezoned, and a funeral home to the west. Here are some views of the site from North Boylan and West Lane Street. And proposed conditions would prohibit certain uses that are normally permitted, limited, or special uses in OX. The request would increase entitlement across residential, office, retail uses, or combinations thereof. And the site has a higher walk score, transit score, bike score, job proximity, and a lower transportation cost compared to citywide averages. So the site is kind of in between 2 transit lines, Route 6, Crabtree, which runs from Moore Square to the Town Ridge Shopping Center, and Go Raleigh Route 16, Oberlin, which goes from Moore Square to Crabtree Valley Mall. So the request would add to the housing supply. It does not include subsidized units, would permit a variety of housing types, allow smaller units, and is within walking distance of transit. And area residents are less likely to be racial minorities or low income than the city average. And it should be noted that the cost of rent has doubled since 2016. So the request is, although uses that are proposed are consistent with the office and residential mixed use designation, the request is inconsistent with the future land use map largely due to the height request of 12 stories. Table LU2 in the comprehensive plan would recommend up to 7 stories for this particular site. The urban limited frontage that's proposed is consistent with the site's designation of downtown and frequent transit area. And overall, the request is largely consistent with the comprehensive plan and is consistent with the urban form map, but again, due to height, is inconsistent with the future land use map. Staff identified 12 consistent policies that support the request. and inconsistent policies related to future land use map and zoning consistency and downtown transitions. And there are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is May 11th, 2024. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I should also note that approval would amend the future land use map on this site from office and residential mixed use to community mixed use.
Thank you. We will now open for public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Tom Johnson with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700, here on behalf of the applicant. We concur with the staff report. I mean, it's largely everything's consistent. The only mentioned inconsistency has to do with the future land use map and the height. But due to recent council action, it's pretty much changed the complexion of that in this area. As this map shows, I've circled the area that we're talking about and requesting the rezoning to 12 stories, and just across the street, council recently approved 20 stories. So it's consistent with that action that's occurred previously. The whole intent here is to be able to do residential above and office and or retail in the lower levels of the site. And the current plan is to do it as condominiums as opposed to rental property, so it'll be by ownership is the plan. So I'm available to answer any questions you may have, but again, we concur that the desire to have more density in this area has been strong from council, and we'll come forward with that to allow for more density, which everything supports in terms of, as a staff report indicates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public additional members who'd like to speak in favor of this project? Then, seeing none, we'll move to the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Would any commissioners like to start off with any questions or discussion? Commissioner O'Haver.
Yeah. I believe I voted to not approve those previous rezonings. I think I might have been one of the few to try to continue to be consistent up here. I think totally understand sort of the Glenwood district, all of the zoning to the east. But as we move west, I'm concerned about 12 stories. I've been concerned about 12 stories in this area for just about every case that's come forward. So I think staff said that at 7 stories, it would bring it into consistency. So I'd love to see the applicant consider 7 stories, make my life easier up here.
Thank you. And could you clarify your concerns about height as you move west and the reason for that?
Well, you've got Wiley Elementary, St. Mary's is just beyond there. Again, fully understand development patterns, Glenwood, the need for density. I think it makes sense to, not in the UDO terms of transitioning, but just from a scale, I think it's not unreasonable to scale from, unfortunately, it's 20 stories across, but the comprehensive plan is looking at 20, 12, 7, and then to get to the more residential and institutional uses. And that band is getting smaller and smaller. And so my concern is just the 12 stories there. I could probably, not probably, I would get behind the 7 stories, bless you, if it brought it into consistency.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the commissioners? Commissioner Bennett.
Commissioner O'Haver expressed my thoughts very well. So it's the height that concerns me, not so much the development itself, but it just feels like it's really inconsistent with what's around it, even though there's that random 20 stories across the street. I'm not sure how I voted on that one, so I'm not going to say. But I'm concerned about the height at this location.
Thank you. And the concerns related to the institutions to the west, excuse me.
Yeah, the impact on the adjacent uses, but also the precedent it's setting, because once we have 12 here, then someone else will come and say, well, like we're using the 20 stories, we have approved 12, so before you know it, this whole area will have all of these heights that are just, they seem to be significantly inconsistent with what's there.
Yeah, we've faced this issue a lot with this overlay district, that
Yes.
perhaps it's outlived its useful life, and now there's disjointed development patterns that, because the original need and purpose for this overlay district has changed with time, as everything does, and now it's no longer the residential neighborhood that it used to be. It's largely just a commercial district. In older homes that used to be residences. So just further highlighting the issues with NCODs that do not expire. So yes, additional comments.
If I could just add to my comments, I'm not as concerned about the NCOD. Just want to articulate that.
Yeah.
I know we struggle with that quite a bit, and I guess just to clarify and to pick up what Commissioner Bennett said, to me the concerns are just the urban fabric and the scale. I'm all for density, and there's certain areas where height makes sense, but as we start to transition down just from the urban fabric in the community to smaller scale buildings, it's not bad to limit in some areas so that you can maintain some of that scale in the neighborhood regardless of the NCOD.
Thank you. Yes. Agree with that. Vice Chair Reeds.
Thanks, Chair Miller. I do agree with Commissioner Bennett's and O'Haver's comments about height. However, I will note that on the current zoning map, there's OX20 down the street, OX12, north and south, already in place west of Boylan. And there is, I appreciate the idea of transitioning down, but if there's 20 stories across the street, we're thinking this would be 12, and then by the time it gets to St. Mary's, it would be down to 7 or 3, ideally. So I understand the concern, but I think there's already a precedent for height west of Boylan, bookending Johnson and, sorry if I can, Hillsborough. So in general, I support this height transition. And I also agree with the NCOD not having an impact for a recommendation in this particular situation.
Thank you. Other thoughts from commissioners?
I also share some concerns about the height there. A lot of Commissioner O'Haver's comments I agree with. I'd also point out the 20-story just to the east here, I believe was East 2623 was the rezoning there. I would point out that rezoning included contributions to an affordable housing fund. It looks like in the report it was $400 per unit, which I think is far, 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 far too small. But there was a contribution there for that rezoning, and this one does not have one. So I would just point that out.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to any of these comments with respect to height, potentially a step back, or affordable housing?
We had not had a discussion about it in terms of contributing to affordable housing. Certainly may consider and could discuss the possibility of a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund potentially, but we have not discussed that at this point. The whole idea is, and was mentioned by Commissioner Raines, the height is already there. I mean, if you put a 12 or 7 up against a 20, you're not going to notice that much of a difference. I mean, you're really not. And Wiley itself is probably 5 stories. And this area is in a hole, so, you know, it's at a lower level than Wiley. So you're really not going to notice that much difference. And don't, from our perspective, given what's happened here, there's not a significant difference. And whether an affordable housing contribution was made with respect to the 20-story rezoning or not, I don't know that that really addresses height. I mean, I understand that it does help the community as a whole, and I get that, and we get that. But everything here is consistent, and there have been steps to really change the direction of the future land use map already, and council's already made that decision. So our position is it makes sense, it transitions, and you've got room to transition down. And this is in an area that's more commercial than some of the other areas. I mean, on St. Mary's Street, you have the funeral home. It's more of a commercial versus residential type area. But this is going to give an opportunity to not only maybe maintain the businesses that are already there, but also add the residential component in an area where clearly council has said we want more residential density. So that's what we're doing. So I really, rather than looking at whether or not to do the affordable housing contribution, which we'll certainly keep in mind, and if the commission wants to make some recommendation with respect to that or not, I'll leave it up to the commission, but we'd prefer to move forward because we feel like overall this is still consistent. And whether we go down to 7 or not isn't going to make a meaningful difference. When you look at it, you won't notice a meaningful difference. Glad to answer any other questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, Commissioner
While you're up
Fox.
there, if I may, I just wanted to
Sure.
clarify. I believe you said this was intended to be a for-sale condo product?
That's the intent. That's the plan.
Okay.
As opposed to a rental. And again, in discussions with the neighborhood, I know at the first neighborhood meeting that made a difference. Obviously, that's not a condition. Obviously, I know, you know, that I realize the caveat that goes with that. But that's the intention here.
Thank you, that's helpful. Personally, I don't have an issue with the height. Everywhere we restrict height, we're putting additional pressure on other areas of town to provide housing. This has the infrastructure available to support said housing. I like the option of it being a for-sale product. There are not a lot of for-sale products available in the market right now at a price point that would probably be similar to what you might see here. I'm personally in support of this, and I don't have concerns about the height.
Thank you. Personally, I continue to be vexed by the lack of sort of coherent planning in this area due to the NCOD. However, and our ability to have coherent planning other than piecemeal, as we're doing. But given the heights in this area, the surrounding commercial uses, and also the fact that if, you know, density, if it's not here, where, right? Where should we put it in the city? When this is walkable and access to transit and access to retail and grocery and drugstores and everything else, this seems like the appropriate place to add density, also consistent with what council has indicated with potential changes to the future land use map in this area. So I too am in support of this project. Other thoughts from the commissioners? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion. Yes, Commissioner Fox.
For case Z4623, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated March 12, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Raines is seconded. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. That motion fails. 'Do Do I have another motion? If not, we can send this out to the council with no recommendation.
My motion, well, my vote against it has nothing to do with, I'm for the case, I'm for the height. I just have an issue with piecemealing out of NCOD. So from my standpoint, why do we even have NCODs if we're going to keep taking project by project? So I'm for the height, I'm for the project. It's just that if we've got a framework and we've got policies surrounding NCODs, why do we keep screwing with them? So that's my
If I may on that point, or if it's too late, I mean, just like to make the comment. I mean, maybe you could just state to council separately, you did that in one of the prior cases, to just recommend that a consideration of an amendment to adjust the NCDO neighborhood overlay here, the NCOD. I think that makes more sense than, I mean, we're dealing with what we have. And obviously the overlay has been removed from a lot of properties here to make things move forward. Maybe that's something for future consideration by council. And all we have to do right now is that just hasn't been changed and should be. And so we're not trying to piecemeal it, nor do we desire to piecemeal it, but we kind of have to deal with what we're dealt with, and that's at a higher level than us. So I'd ask that maybe you consider that.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It may not surprise you to know that we have made such recommendations to council multiple times over the past, I'm going to say half decade that I have been on the Planning Commission.
It doesn't
but we're happy to
surprise
make
me.
another one. Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me at all, but if that were something we had control over, and I would definitely agree. I mean, I definitely agree that that needs to be dealt with so we don't piecemeal it. But it hasn't been dealt with, so we're unfortunately left with something that has to be piecemeal.
I agree. And unfortunately, that is continues to be above my pay grade at this point. But thoughts are well taken, and I think shared by the rest of the Planning Commission as well. To that end, would someone like to make a motion to send this to the council with no recommendation? Or David, could you clarify if the motion fails, then it just goes to council with no recommendation?
You haven't acted
Okay.
until you vote with the majority. It's sort of.
And if we're unable to achieve one? If we are deadlocked?
And if no one wants to make the motion, then you still need to adopt a consistency statement. So you'd want to at least get a majority on whether or not you think this is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the flume.
Thank you.
I was going to make a motion.
Sure,
For
please.
for denial, to be clear.
Okay. You can
I
state
move to
your
recommend
reasons for
adoption of the
record.
proposed consistency statement dated March 12th, 2024, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend denial of the zoning amendment.
Would you like to state your reasons why for the record so that that can go?
Piecemeal removal of the NCOD, I think the height jump that several of us talked about, and also no additional conditions for things like affordable housing, public parks, et cetera.
Okay. Did he provide a consistency statement?
Yes, he did.
Okay, thank you. And we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? For those opposed? That motion fails 4-4. Yes,
My
Commissioner.
only comments for the product is for the product type. I love seeing the condominium product out there. It does provide a diversity of housing types in the local area, and for me, that's what's important on this particular case for me. I also don't think it is in the TOD, so I'm a little hesitant that it doesn't already have like the affordable housing height density bonuses that are attributed to it. So I'm a little awkward about the affordable housing component of that discussion. But the condominium aspect of it is what's important to me that I like.
Yes, Commissioner Fox.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we vote case C-4623 out with no recommendation to council. It is reasonably consistent with a number of items within the comprehensive plan, specifically the provision of housing in urbanized areas, but it is inconsistent with other parts of the comprehensive plan specific to NCODs.
Okay, thank you. A motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Vice Chair Raines is seconded. Further discussion or debates on the merits of the motion?
When you present this, Chair Miller, could you just say again, state again about our concern with having to piecemeal the NCOD this way, and perhaps council would like to take a look at them more holistically so we aren't in this position again.
Thank you. Would you like to add a friendly amendment recommendation to council on something specific? Like,
Is it, well, let me ask first
Yeah.
before I try to amend Commissioner Fox's motion, because she makes the best motions.
it would just add a recommendation. It wouldn't change.
But is this something that we could ask council to let us discuss in strategic planning? Or, I mean, what can we do? Or would council ask staff to do some sort of study of it? Or
I believe in our bylaws, we're allowed to refer an item to strategic planning for discussion. Any action that would result from that, there would need to be a formal request of council. Mr. York, please correct me.
Okay.
If that's,
So like if we were asking for a text change or something, then that, okay. So
Or city-initiated
perhaps-
rezoning to remove the NCOD from the zone?
Perhaps I will not amend Commissioner Fox's motion, but could we refer this item to strategic planning?
We
And then maybe
could.
there is a recommendation to council coming out of strategic planning.
We could. Or we could, if we, I mean, we have, again, discussed this for many years. If there's something specifically, we could move straight to action and asking, understanding that when we ask council to authorize something, it involves lots of staff input and typically then comes back through the planning commission for more input after that as well. So any recommendation to council could be broad enough to sort of put action into motion as opposed to sending it to strategic planning. I had the same debate for myself on this last item about the watershed protection. Should we send it to strategic planning? And I was sort of thinking, as opposed to spending several additional months studying, to then ask council to then let us study it, to then do something, send it straight on through council.
Well, it seems like that, if we do that, that's separate to the motion. So I guess I'll allow us to vote on the motion, and then I'll try to craft something.
Great.
To request of
Okay.
council.
It's the best practice not to add a general request to a specific zoning case. I mean, you have made recommendations that council allow an applicant to revise conditions or so forth like that, but that's tied to that zoning
Right.
case. If you're going to ask for a larger scope thing, that needs to be a second and separate vote.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to vote this to council with no recommendation. Any further discussion? All those, yes, Commissioner Haver.
Sorry, just so I don't have to do it after. I just want to be clear, again, I am for a variety of housing. I think if you go back and look at my voting record, I generally support more density. I think that the comment about not a noticeable difference from 12 to 20 makes sense if you're looking from the 20-story, but even the block to the south is a majority of residential. So I think there is a difference between 7 and 12 when you're looking from 3 versus 20. And again, my concern is all along the west side there with some institutional uses. So I just want to be clear that I think that it makes sense from the urban fabric. I think that 7 stories is considerable increase from 3. And I do generally like to see when we are, especially if we were going from 3 to 12, which makes it inconsistent. I agree with Commissioner Reeves. There's generally a few more conditions that apply to the case when you're asking for such a increase in entitlement. So just clear that I'm for all these, and I just think this particular situation, I think 12 is high. I could support 7.
Thank you very much. Motion and a second. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much.
Chair Miller?
Yes.
Per our previous conversation, I need to be excused for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you.
Do we have quorum if I just take a quick moment to walk around?
We do. We should continue to have 6. Thank you. But to that end, I did want to just close out the discussion. Is there an additional motion to ask council to authorize a text change or to recommend to council to authorize a text change or any other action? Yes.
From my perspective, the text change is a solution to a problem, but we haven't quite identified what the problem is. So I would recommend that the item go to strategic planning to get a handle on what the issues are and what that might look like as a first step is an inventory of cases that have requested removal of an NCOD. So we might map where that is most prevalent, which particular NCODs see that more often than not.
Thank you. Do we need to make a motion to move something to strategic planning? Yes?
Yeah, that would work.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a motion to move the topic of reviewing NCODs and the history of requested rezoning removals from the NCOD and their impact on city planning and potential solutions and actions that we could take in order to fix that.
Can we add HODs to that too? Or just NCODs?
I would recommend just NCODs because there's a significant amount of state regulation related to historic preservation that might make that slightly different topic.
A little clunky. Thank you very much. Any other discussion on the motion or amendments?
The motion as worded is indicating a lot of staff work, which I do have some hesitation about without council authorization. And so I wonder if you might consider
rewording.
Like you did before, when you were looking at the policies for the affordable housing map, when the comprehensive plan was amended, the new map for the comprehensive plan was basically just taking the new data and applying it to the policies in the comprehensive plan. You all mentioned concern about some of those policies, wanted to know what they were and so forth. So you asked council to look at the comprehensive plan policies for the affordable housing, and they granted that to you. So that's when you put that into strategic planning. So I think that's what, because
the other path would be to, for the committee to do the work of discussing without commissioning staff, such a significant amount of staff support to start your conversation.
Yes.
Maybe you could start your conversation and use that time to identify what staff support you might need.
If that's the case, would it be okay to add the HODs to that discussion where we could perhaps parse them out in that meeting?
I would like
Personally, I'm
to
not in
keep them
support of that because they truly are a different animal. Although they're both overlays, the way they function and the enabling legislature related to having historic overlay districts versus something related to neighborhood conservation are completely separate topics. Although if that is an important topic, I think it could be referred separately.
I think I would support it being separate as well. And we also have an advisory body that deals with HODs, so I don't want to overstep what we do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have additional comments too?
Yes. So I'm hearing what Bynum is saying, and I know that's very real. I'm hearing what you said, Chair Miller, earlier too, about we have discussed this at the table many, many, many times. So I'm not sure what we would discuss in committee that we haven't discussed at the table. So if we need to request some sort of authorization from council so we can dig deeper, then I think that's what we should do, because just referring it to discuss, we're just going to repeat what we've already said. I think we've already talked about our issues with NCODs. And so I want to have some sort of recommendation to council that is an action, is a solution, as you said.
Yeah,
And I don't think we can, Mr. York recommended or suggested a type of motion could be requesting a text change, or I think it was you, Chairman. Anyway, sorry, to just have council consider a text change to remove them. I don't want to do that either, because just removing them all broad brush, I think there are definitely equity issues with NCODs. There are some NCODs that are in place to preserve something that needs to be preserved. There are some NCODs that are in place to preserve exclusion. Just removing them with one broad brush doesn't take in that nuance. So I want to make sure that we have a real intelligent conversation about why they're in place, where they are, the impacts of them, which ones might be working counter to our goals and objectives around housing diversity and equity, and which ones might be supporting that. So I think there's a bigger conversation that we need to have that might require a little more staff support. So if we need to get authorization from council, I would be in favor of doing that.
I'm in favor of that. One thought I had about putting it in committee is, are you making a request for changes to process, to implementation, to existence, or to policies, not regulatory language? So we could have the opportunity to discuss that as a group. What is the avenue you're looking at? Or instead of specific broader topic areas, are you looking at a specific NCOD, like just one of them in particular? That does not. I don't know. I'm just so when the request does go through, it is narrow enough to be supported reasonably by staff resources. However, I could also support, for various reasons, why it would be helpful for staff to have authorization to participate in any of those conversations.
Sorry, I didn't hear where that shook out.
I think we can discuss it in those pieces, just like you said. I think it would be good to walk through those steps like that, because then we could see how we arrive at whatever we arrive at. But I think all of those require staff resources too. So I think if we know we're going to need it, we might as well ask council for it.
I have a question. Is it too late to refer this to our strategic planning committee meeting tomorrow? Yes. So this would be referral. So if we did, instead of asking council for authorization, if we just referred it to strategic planning, that would be our April 10th, 2024 meeting. And perhaps at that time, we could sort of outline exactly what we're requesting from council. And it might not need to be too long of a meeting, but this is I am also very much inclined to action, and on all of these things. So, but I do think we might need to get just a hair more organized on what we're asking for from council at this time.
Chair Miller, I'd just like to make a comment. I'm not on the strategic planning committee, but if I was to attend, I would be a citizen, or I couldn't make comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because
It's a pretty fluid committee structure, though.
yeah, I'm pretty interested in what that discussion, how that would turn out, so.
Same.
I will probably attend.
Yeah, you could attend and participate, it's just if the committee took a vote, you wouldn't vote.
Thank you.
Yes, so I guess the motion then, I would like to rescind my previous motion. and make a new motion to refer to the Strategic Planning Committee the topic of NCODs and to basically review and outline some of the challenges that we've noticed over the past several years in order to request action from council at the end of that discussion.
Second.
Motion and second. Further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much. And the others are excused. Thank you, Commissioner Fox. Okay. Oop. This is closed. Okay, moving on to next new business item Z6223 at Harper Road. This case is to change approximately 4.51 acres from R4 to R10 with conditions. And I will turn to Bronwyn for, I will turn to Hannah for a presentation from city planning staff. Thank you.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this is case Z6223, about 1.8 acres, currently zoned R4, requesting R6 conditional use. There's also the Special Residential Parking Overlay District, which is included in the request, and your deadline for action is in May. So this is an area predominantly residential, mix of R4 and R10 and R6 zoning. Located, this is south-southwest Raleigh, off to the right, the east of this image is eventually the South Saunders, South Wilmington corridors, mainly residential in this area. Carolina Pines Park is to the northwest, although Harper Road does not connect directly to that property. Zooming into this site, you can see the frontage on Harper Road. Currently is the site of the South Raleigh Civitan Club. And some views from Harper Road about what that looks like, north and south. There is one proposed zoning condition currently, which is to cap the density at no more than 18 principal dwelling units on the site. And so existing versus proposed, both residential districts. Main difference here is the dimensional standards, so lot size, smaller setbacks allow for greater flexibility on the site. This site has an average transit score, but a lower walk and bike score than average. It's most likely because it's a little ways away from any commercial destinations of that nature, but still a relatively low cost of transportation and higher than average drought proximity. So the site has walking distance to one bus line, Route 7L. And there are no guaranteed subsidized units in this request, but it would allow a variety of housing types, smaller units, smaller lots than average, and within walking distance of transit. Demographics for this area, there's a higher proportion of residents in the census tract this site is located in that are racial minorities, low income, or have less than a high school education than the city average. There's less data on median rent than we normally have for sites, but what we do have is a small decrease in median rent between 2020 and 2022. Future land use map designation is low-scale residential, which the requested R6 is consistent with. No urban form guidance for this area, and so the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. That includes policies around housing variety, zoning for housing, and maintaining sort of the existing urban pattern. No inconsistent policies were identified, and again, your deadline for action is May 11th.
Thank you very much. We will now open public comment to those in support. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Commissioner Chair Miller, members of the slightly reduced commission, Toby Coleman, Smith Anderson, 150 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of Redeeming Development Group and on this rezoning. As was outlined by Hannah, this is a rezoning from R4 to R6. You can see on the left the current map. One of the aspects of this is it was on the overview that of Hannah's staff report is that there's a series of about 10 ghost lots, well, exactly 10 ghost lots on this property. And that's relevant because under the city's ordinances, these non-conforming lots can be developed with a single family or a duplex by right, even though they don't meet the current standards. These were all platted out in 1946. So our proposal is not, Redeeming does not want to develop these, but they would like to develop a slightly denser development than is allowed under R4. They would like to have up to 18 units. You can see the current zoning. While this particular neighborhood on Harper Road is R4, there's a significant amount of R6 and R10 surrounding in the surrounding streets. And here's sort of a general outline of what is being thought about. This is a total of eight lots with duplex townhome development, a 2-unit development on each lot. So you end up with 16 parking with sufficient parking to allow for on-site parking for both units. We did hear concerns at the neighborhood meeting. There was obviously concerns about density. That was, obviously the density we are proposing is the density we think is appropriate and that Redeeming wants to do. So that's not something we necessarily see fully eye to eye on with the neighbors. But we do understand the concerns about parking, so we are working on a revised condition on parking. And so would want to come back with that to y'all. This is, as Hannah mentioned, this is designated as low-density residential on the comprehensive, on the future land use map. R6 is consistent with that designation. And so with that, as I said, David Blanton's here with me, and we are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? And seeing none, we'll open it up to the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Thank you, and please introduce yourself when you come to the podium.
My name is Shane Faison. So I stay in the area, and this is like my first time kind of like speaking against something. But if most people are high school educated, and like that's to the max, like the new development, I don't know if I can ask the right questions. If the new development is coming in, is it going to be for like affordable housing, or like, is that not the directed question to you all, or is it like to the developer? I don't really know how to ask that question because I live in the area. I'm college educated, but I know my neighbors, they're elderly. A lot of them don't like a lot of change and everything. If it's a lot of traffic over there, everybody gets like suspicious of like what's going on. It's very like tight knit. Like you might not know your neighbors, but if you like go to the store and everything, you'll be like, I live on, and it's just like, it's a community then. So, and we haven't seen much construction in the area in like forever. And I've lived over there about maybe 7 years. And again, everybody kind of knows everybody. Everybody's kind of respectful of everybody. I'm just wondering, like, with new construction and everything coming in, would it hinder people that are not as educated? Because again, I am college educated, but a lot of people didn't have that opportunity, and a lot of people are at a medium age. I'm going to say probably of like 50. And not saying that 50 is old, but it's like, that's like, okay, am I going to do this, or am I going to continue on with what I've been doing for life and everything like that? So I just worry that with something like this project, it's a gateway to other things happening in the neighborhood. It'll kind of be like, okay, well, we saw this happen in 2024, and we asked for the rezoning and everything to happen. Okay, so now in 2026, let's try and do this. Let's try and do that. We know that already these people in this area make a certain amount, but when people with more money want to come in and change things, and not saying that change is bad. So I don't know if I'm actually for or against. I'm only educated in what I saw on the piece of paper that actually came to my home. So I guess I just say that to kind of put something in you all's head to just kind of think about. But I do live in the area. I love my neighborhood. It's extremely quiet. And also too is I don't even know if there's like a survey that can be done on the wildlife, but I've never seen a beaver before, but I've seen a beaver come out the drain before. Raccoon, possums, deer. Only thing that we haven't seen is like literally a bear. There's snakes, spiders, everything else. So I just think that if like you start developing on land that you think is just ghost, as you said, it might not actually be ghost. It might be home to wildlife and everything as well. And again, my name is Shane Faison, and I've never done this before, so that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Faison, for the great work for your first time. Yes. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, then we will bring it. Oh, is there one more? Yes. Please come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Hello, Planning Commission. Thank you for your time today. My name is James Hodge. I live at 2428 Fairway Drive. If you look at the picture there, I'm one of the lots there that has the dotted lines going along there. I certainly understand the challenges Raleigh has right now with housing. I became a homeowner about 3 years ago or so, so I certainly understand that the supply is low. I just wanted to speak maybe on behalf of a lot of people in my neighborhood who I've talked to personally, who have concerns about this. Just, 18 duplex units on, such a small plot of land. We're just really worried about how it would affect, the community. I know duplexes can often be a very popular item to buy and rent out. So we're just kind of concerned about how that can maybe change the patchwork of the community. Like Mr. Faison said, it's a very quiet community. It's very nice, and I just wanted to maybe speak for the people who couldn't be here today and just say we have some concerns about how many units that could really be fit there practically and how it could affect the neighborhood. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments in opposition? Okay. Then seeing none, I will bring it back to the table to open up with discussion. I was going to see if I might start with the applicant, if he could discuss some of the neighborhood outreach that was conducted.
We've had a neighborhood meeting, and that's primarily been the outreach. Glad that we have some neighbors here. I think we've had some challenges in being able to follow up with folks. We had people attend. I don't know that we had a lot of. I think we made the one person who provided us with an email at the neighborhood meeting. We reached out to them and have not heard back. So glad to see. I think Shane and James here, and we'll follow up with them to make sure that we have some conversations with them as well.
Thank you. Could you give us a little summary of that neighborhood meeting or some of the concerns that you heard?
I think the comments from Mr. Faison and Mr. Hodge captured a lot of it. There's a lot of concerns about changing how this might change the neighborhood. There are some concerns about a different type of housing type. I won't put any value judgments on that, but there were concerns expressed about that. There was concerns about would this increase traffic in the neighborhood? Again, I don't think it's a significant increase. I think, I don't have the numbers right with me, but it was a relatively low number according to the city's Envision analysis. I think it was one car one car every 20 minutes in the AM peak hour and one car every 10 minutes in the PM peak hour. So it's pretty limited traffic. But you do hear that whenever you get more density, and so that's some of what we heard. And then we did hear about parking and concerns that people be parking on the street, et cetera. And so we are working on that. Basically, we're working to come up with a condition that basically says there will be sufficient space for to park on site for the units on the property. We're working through crafting that. We haven't done that yet, but wanted to do that as part of going through the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much for that description and for being proactive in that way. Well, I will now bring it back to the table for additional discussions and questions from the commission. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
It sounds like the applicant is asking for a deferral.
That's correct. Yeah, and any additional input that this board has. I mean, again, to put a little bit finer point on it, if I may, just to give you some context. I didn't mean to interrupt, but if I can have that. As I mentioned, there's 10 current lots, platted lots. I call them ghost lots. They're platted lots, and they're fairly narrow. And so the idea is, and there is a recombination plat that has been filed and is going through review for 8 lots. The real driver here that initially started this process was that Redeeming was looking at how they would lay out these 2-unit buildings on these 8 lots, and they determined that the R4 side setback, which is 10 feet, was insufficient, and that they needed something smaller than that to avoid a very, very narrow building. And so they were looking at moving to R6 so they could get a 5-foot side setback. So that's the real driver here for them. And then obviously we are working to try to address the neighborhood concerns about parking and otherwise. This is an area, I'm not sure about wildlife. This has traditionally been the Sivden Club's lodge. And so it is, I think that group is selling it. So it is an area that does not have current housing on it.
Thank you. My comment was going to be, it sounds like the neighbors who spoke aren't necessarily opposed, they just have questions, and they want to understand how this development might blend in with the current development. So what I was going to ask was if we are going to be deferring this for you to work on conditions, if you might consider meeting with the neighbors again. And maybe those of you who spoke can talk to your neighbors to make sure they come out if they're able to. And maybe if they're not able to, there could be like a link or something for people who aren't able to come. Because it seems like sometimes we get opposition when it's really just uncertainty. And people are seeing this big change and they're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Perhaps if they can just get a better understanding, they'll be more comfortable with it. Maybe not, but perhaps they would be. So if we're going to defer it anyway, if you would consider another neighborhood meeting, I think that would be great.
Just to clarify, we'll work on coordinating that. Just to clarify, I think what I would ask you is does the commission want to see us do a formal notice process with the neighborhood meeting and go through that? Just from a timing perspective, you have to send a notice out written notice 2 weeks in advance, et cetera, et cetera. You have to be in person. Is that what you're looking for versus virtual
I will
meeting?
defer to staff. Does that could they have another neighborhood meeting without doing that if it weren't, I guess, an official neighborhood meeting?
Absolutely.
Then
Okay.
I would say by whatever means necessary, perhaps you could work with the 2 gentlemen who spoke today and they could help make sure that the word gets out and coordinate something that could maximize participation.
Yeah, makes sense.
I also noted that there was a 10% linguistically isolated population. I don't know what that language is, but if there are people in the area at that high percentage that maybe speak a different language, perhaps we could make sure that they're aware of the meeting as well. And it could be that it's a very large census tract, and so maybe the linguistically isolated aren't in this area, but if they are, just want to make sure that they're aware as well. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the applicant for offering to continue to re-engage with the neighbors and have additional outreach. I too would support an unofficial neighborhood meeting. I don't want to require a second official meeting I don't think this triggers that under the EDO, but thank you for offering for the additional general engagement. Other comments from the commissioners?
Yes, just one quick clarification on the application. You're asking for 18 principal units, but that's divided up with 8 lots, right? Can you clarify what?
The current.
Should it be 16 or? Yeah.
Well, I think we have asked for 18. I think right now the plan is for 16. So we'll take another look at that as we're going through everything else. I think when we brought it in, I think the thought was the max could be 18. That's now that there's been a line drawing done, I think we can take another look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Haber.
Thanks. Generally, well, more than generally, I'm in support of this. I do think the applicant should take a look at maybe a parking requirement, so I appreciate them bringing that forward. I do like the idea of continuing conversations with the neighbors. I would just ask the applicant, again, it might not be feasible, totally understand the rezoning to allow for a 5-foot setback. There is an existing home there to the, I guess it's sort of towards the northwest, and so if it's 5 feet from there, it's hard to tell from iMaps and from Google Earth really how close that unit is to the parcel. So I have no concerns about sort of that 5-yard setback all the way to the southwest there internally. People know what they're buying when they buy the lot, but if it was possible, if there's a way to increase a little bit to the west, again, as that person bought that lot. I mean, my house personally, there is no setback. I share the driveway between my neighbors, so we literally have a driveway between us. So I understand that sort of kind of setup, but knowing that there's an existing residence there, I'd just like you to take a look at it and see if it's feasible and just try to be considerate of the neighbor sort of towards the northwest there. It might not be feasible. I understand building dimensions are sometimes set. You're trying to be as efficient as you can, and so I don't want to increase any of the costs, but I just like to ask that you take a look at it and be thoughtful about that one adjacent resident.
Take a look at that.
Thank you. Any other comments? So to summarize, the applicant is asking to defer this case to provide additional time to make changes related to the parking requirements and also reviewing the setbacks to the west. And during that time, we'll also re-engage with the neighbors. Any other discussion on this case? Well then, in that case, our next Planning Commission regular meeting is March 26th. In order to hear this with revised conditions at that meeting, the conditions would have to be in by this Friday, the 15th. Would that provide the applicant enough time?
I don't think so, based on the desire to have a neighborhood meeting. I would request that we be scheduled for, I guess, the first meeting in April.
Okay, the first meeting in April then is April 9th. That would provide enough time?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And obviously we can, if I think we have, until the second meeting in April? Is that our deadline, Hannah? Okay. Yeah, and if we need additional time, we can update you at the April 9th meeting.
Okay. Yes.
Could we just make sure, Toby, that you get the contact information for the 2 speakers?
That was my plan right after
Thank
we
you.
get done here.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the speakers who came out to speak on this case today as well. Okay, then, with that, I will make a motion to defer this item, case Z6223, to our April 9th meeting in order to allow the applicant time to engage with the public and make additional conditions.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our next item, F3, agenda item F3, the rezoning case Z324 at Crosslink Road. This case is to change approximately 4.51 acres from R4 to R10 with conditions. And I will turn to Bronwyn for a presentation from the city.
Thanks. Bronwyn Reedus with Planning and Development. So this request is to rezone approximately 4.5 acres from residential 4 to residential 10 with conditions. Your deadline for action is May 11th. So this site is located in the southern part of Raleigh. It's nearby Garner Road, near the intersection of Crosslink Road and Garner Road. Zoning in the area is predominantly residential, as you can see. And you can see that kind of low-scale residential zoning reflected in this aerial image. A lot of single-family detached houses in the area. I want to point out as well the Biltmore Hills Park, which is a couple hundred feet north of the site. You can see the pool in the image there in the northwest corner of the screen. Here's just a look at an existing stream that is intersecting along the western boundary of the site. Here's a couple views of the site. The first being from Crosslink Road, the second from a stub street that's stubbed to the northern property line of the site today. That is Fellers Pond Drive. The applicant has proposed 3 conditions with this request. The first, limiting residential density to 40 dwelling units. The second is granting an easement along that western boundary line and then providing a pedestrian connection connecting the Crosslink Road right-of-way through the site to that greenway easement. And the third condition is the provision of an 8.5-foot tall fence along that northern property line that is shared with those several homes that you saw in the aerial image, or in lieu of a fence, tree conservation area maintained along that common line. Here's a snapshot of the change in entitlement. The existing zoning number is estimated using our Envision Tomorrow tool. The proposed zoning is limited by that condition number 1, obviously, but the change in entitlement you can see is just increasing a very small amount here. So the site doesn't have a lot of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure surrounding it. It does have access to transit, and transportation costs are lower in this area, and there's a higher job proximity in this area than the metropolitan area at large. Here's a look at the existing bus service access. This yellow line that you see fronting the subject site, this is the Route 7L, the Carolina Pines connector. Also want to note that Crosslink Road is planned for future frequent transit service, which would mean service every 15 minutes. So the request does not include any subsidized units. It does allow for smaller units, smaller lot sizes, and permits a variety of housing types. Just want to note, however, that the smaller units and smaller kind of lots that are allowed through the R10 aren't really being coupled with a major increase in entitlement. And so due to the kind of layout of the site, that does kind of allow for the maximum entitlement to be achieved through like a single family detached building scenario, rather than utilizing diverse housing types like attached houses, if they were to use current zoning standards. I'm happy to answer more questions about that, but I wanted to touch on that really quickly. So the population in this area is majority people of color and majority low-income earners, and rents in this area have been increasing really quickly since 2016. This area could benefit from an increased housing supply and an increased supply in lower cost housing. The requested zoning district of residential 10 with conditions is consistent with low-scale residential, and that zoning condition number 1, limiting the case to 40 units, is keeping it consistent with low-scale residential. The zoning district is a residential district, which means it won't include a zoning frontage, but this site does have urban form guidance. It's in the frequent transit area and along a transit emphasis corridor. Being in the frequent transit area allows the site to be eligible for the frequent transit development option, which is a tool in the UDO that allows smaller lot sizes, smaller lot area per unit to be able to kind of increase density without having to go through the rezoning process, but that is in exchange for the inclusion of affordability. So just a refresher, that frequent transit development option requires any units over 12, 20% of those units to be affordable to the 60% area median income. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's a number of key policies in the comprehensive plan cited here. A couple of inconsistencies are being triggered by this request, and that has to do with the smaller lot sizes, the smaller lot area per unit that's allowed through the rezoning, but not necessarily increasing the total units. Just kind of allowing for that maximum entitlement to be achieved through like a single family detached scenario without incorporating other diverse housing options. However, the different housing options are still allowed. There's no conditions that are saying prohibiting those housing types. Just wanted to highlight that may reduce the likelihood of like missing middle housing being constructed here. So there were some clerical corrections that Parks and Rec wanted to see on these conditions, and those were resolved by the deadline. So this is not an outstanding issue anymore. It has been resolved. No more outstanding issues. Your deadline for action is May 11th. You've got the March 26th and April 9th Planning Commission meetings coming up. I'm happy to answer any questions for staff before you open up discussion.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission. I think it's still morning, barely. I'm Isabel Maddox, Nichols and Crampton, 3700 Glenwood Avenue, Raleigh 27612. I'm here today with my client, Vincent Hembrick, and my civil engineer, Ed Sconfienza. This case is hopefully one that you can look favorably on. The objective here is to do a townhouse development, and we have requested the R10 with a cap of 40 dwelling units to allow for, a little bit smaller lot sizes. We are in the frequent transit district, and I don't know if you are aware of this, but there's a glitch in the city's ordinance on townhouses in the frequent transit. There's provisions that apply to lots when they, I think the intention was to apply to sites. So it would require a 45-foot lot for a townhouse as opposed to, even in the conventional, the lot is 16 feet. So it's a little bit of a glitch, and I've been told that staff is aware of that glitch, but they're saying they can't amend the ordinance until, as you know, there's the frequent transit is in litigation now, and they've decided they don't want to amend the ordinance while it's in litigation. So that's my understanding, is that they're not willing to make that amendment until after the resolution of the litigation. So for that reason, and also the difficulty in doing affordable housing without a subsidy. This does not have a subsidy. Mr. Hembrick is a builder. He's a military veteran, but he hasn't done a lot of big projects. And as you may know, to get a subsidy, you've got to be a more sophisticated, experienced developer. That's one of the criteria to get North Carolina Housing Finance Agency award of credits. So that's not going to be the case here. I do want you to hear from Mr. Hembrick, because I think he's got it. He really has a mission to build a project for his neighborhood. He grew up in this neighborhood. He lives on the site right now. He plans to continue to live on the site, build half the site, and then move into one of the towns, and then build the other half, remove his house and build the other half of the site. I want Mr. Hembrick to come up and just say a few words about what he proposes here.
Good morning. So I guess I come to you from different stakeholders. My name is Vincent Hembrick, 933 Crosslink Road. I come to you from different positions as the property owner. I was there probably before anything was developed. I'm a native of Southeast Raleigh, got a few houses. Actually, all my houses are in Southeast Raleigh, 832, 2805. Came to Raleigh from 1605, Crosslink, Southgate Drive. But I know one of the things here is the affordable housing, which I get that, because to the south of me, they're planning like 150 plus units of affordable housing, which I think they gave like $3 million. I don't have nothing against that, but I also, as the homeowner and as part of the neighborhood to the north of me, is single family homes that they didn't get a subsidy, that we've been there together for a long time, and they have concerns about the traffic was probably one of the main concerns they had, but also about their property value. So I come to it as the middle point of, like a step down is what I envision: homes, townhome, apartments. Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. Retired Marine, I'm a veteran. I do contracts for the VA, disabled veterans. Home inspector, general contractor, barber, kind of do it all. 100-hour weeks. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you.
So as Mr. Hembrick said, this property, and I'm going to see if I can use the city slides, because they tell a pretty good story. Well, I can do it right here. The property just to the south, R6CU, has been is in site plan process for a true affordable development. They are requesting somewhere in the 150, 160 units. And that did not require a rezoning because they did use the frequent transit development option. They're doing an apartment building type there. The property immediately to our north is a row of single-family detached houses. So we think this, as Vince said, we think this townhouse in between those two is a good transition. And the main concerns that the neighborhoods had during the neighborhood meeting, yeah, that's a good picture. You can see the single families up here. Down below, it's an affordable site. The main concerns is the traffic from the apartment community come through our site, and I don't think it will, because the site plan that's in gestation right now does not show a vehicular connection to our site. So therefore, they would not have a way to get vehicularly from the apartment site here to to up here to the single family. What we would propose for our access would be to connect here, right here, that street. And right now, I'm not proposing anything on Crosslink. So we feel like we have heard, I mean, we've sat through this whole meeting, we've heard this at many other meetings, the desire for some affordable commitment. And Vince has been very committed to wanting to do a development for his neighborhood that can be afforded by workforce housing, really. People who live in the neighborhood, who might work at the city, might be teachers, might be policemen, and he's very committed to that. So we are willing to offer a condition for workforce housing. We would agree to do 10%, and this is not in the conditions that have been filed, we'd have to come back, 10% of approved units for an 80% AMI. So it's not 60%, it's 80%. We've done the math on that, and he says that will fit at the lower part of what he thinks his, and it could be for sale, it could be for rent, but either rent or mortgage payment would qualify at 30% of that 80% AMI. So we would like to offer that to you, which would mean we would need to come back. We feel like we can put that in fairly quickly by the end of this week, and therefore we'd love to come back and have you look at this case again on March the 26th. You know, as was said, there is a greenway easement here, and there's a connection to the public sidewalk on Crosslink. And we are consistent, even without this affordable condition. And I consider it an affordable condition, even though it's kind of workforce more than, you know, for the lower AMI. So we believe we're consistent without that, but we like to add that to the mix because we you know, I think it works with what Vince is proposing here. And happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this case? Then seeing none, we will open it up to the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. If you could all please come forward and introduce yourself at the podium. Oh, in favor of the case. Yes. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and stand before you this morning in support of Vince Hemrick. He's a fine young man. I've known him a long time. But even more important, his property is right across the street from property I own on that property. We have 7 acres on that side of town as well. So I'm watching to see how you guys are going to treat Vince. And hopefully when my time comes, you'll treat me the same way. God bless.
Okay, thank you, sir. And could you share your name with us?
My name is Robert Dobbin.
Robert Dobbin.
Dobbin, yes, D-O-B-B-I-N.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dobbin. Okay. Any other comments in favor of this case? Then seeing none, we will reopen public comment for the opposition. Any opposed to this case, please raise your hand or come forward. And then seeing none, we will bring this back to the table. And I'd like to thank the applicant for bringing this case forward and for also offering an additional condition related to affordable housing. Although I would note the type of housing type that is proposed even without that condition seems in high demand in this area and entirely appropriate. And while capital A affordable housing is important throughout the city, so are other housing types also. We, you know, representing all of the cities at all of the residents at all of the income levels. And for one, and there's a huge demand for this type of market rate workforce housing. And in addition, again, as I've said before, relieving pressure on housing types across income levels improves prices across the board citywide as well. So I am supportive of this project. But Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Isabel, I'm going to surprise you. I was not going to critique this one for not having affordable housing. And the reason why is because of the affordable housing development that's going on adjacent to it. While I support affordable housing, I do not support concentrating affordable housing in areas that are lower resourced like this one, because that also has impact. So I really appreciate your offer of workforce housing, though, because as Chair Miller said, I think that's needed as well. And I think people in lower income areas should also have the opportunity to live in that type of housing if they are able to. So I appreciate this development. I appreciate what Mr. Hembrick is doing. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being committed to your community as you are. The one thing that I had a question about was the condition about the fence. I like the tree conservation. I'm not wild about fences unless they're protecting people from some hazard or something dangerous. If we're just trying to separate single family from multifamily,
The fence would be on the northern edge of this property, and that was a request of the single-family neighbors to the north. And so we agreed we do a fence unless we do tree conservation in that location.
okay.
So
Well,
that was
I appreciate you being responsive to the neighbors. Personally, I like the tree conservation as opposed to the fence, because again, I don't think we need to separate people from people.
Agreed.
I mean, we just had a conversation on the last case about how a new development would blend in with the existing community. We're not going to blend in with a fence. So if there were something hazardous that we were trying to separate people from for help or safety reasons, I would fully support that. But just to separate people based on housing type, exactly, does not seem to be in line with our vision as an inclusive, diverse city.
Agreed. Thank you. Well put. And I'm always supportive of that same idea as well. I was just wondering with the neighbors, is it that is lining up to their backyards? Is it more towards privacy for maintaining the privacy in their backyards?
Yes.
Yeah. And most of that.
They front on Crown Crossing, and their backyards will back up to this development.
Because I know in some cases too, for backyard fences, that can just be an amenity for privacy or for the like. Okay. But thank you for that explanation in this area. I just wanted to just point that out in case that was more, I don't want to put an intent on the neighbors to the north, in this specific case, but certainly when it's laterally like that, aligning on the same frontage of the street and I'm not in favor of that. Other comments from the commissioners? Questions? Well, it sounds like this case, we're going to be deferring this case because the applicant would like to offer that condition.
Well, I'd like to add, if the applicant or the applicant's representation, I'm fine with the case as it is. So if that's something that you want to do, then we can't tell you to do it. But if I'm fine with it without that condition of affordable housing.
Okay, that'd be great.
Or if you wanted to do it, couldn't we recommend that it be done before it goes to council? I'm fine. I'm really fine, whether you do it or not.
I commend the applicant for coming to us with that, but I think given all of the affordable housing that's going on and given this area, and I just recently mentioned earlier in this meeting that I don't like a concentration of affordable housing in East Raleigh. So I think additional housing, period, in this area would work.
Thank you. I just looking by soft nods, I think others agree with that.
I'd like to add,
Yes.
and I appreciate Commissioner Mann's comments. If that's the way the motion goes forward, I will certainly support it that way. I think in a couple of cases earlier, we were talking about setting a precedent and the importance of setting a precedent. And I appreciate the applicant being willing to make that recommendation. And I personally, if they can do that and get it back in a short amount of time, I would love to see that start to become part of our record, that we're having conversation about, that the applicant's willing to do it, and we're not just sending it to council and having council ask for that. So I'm happy to vote either way. I also appreciate, but I understand Commissioner Mann's perspective on that.
If if I may, the other thing that kind of came to mind is that the affordable housing, just to make sure, would it be up to 120% AMI, or is it to 60% AMI? I just want to make sure
she
that
said 80.
there's-
At 80.
80? Okay. I just want to make sure of that, because even at 120% AMI, we still have a housing need. So I want to make sure that there is flexibility in the parcel to be able to serve the demographics that
This would
might
be
stand.
10% of the unit. What we were going to propose was 10% of the approved units would be affordable for 80% AMI.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, that's,
mean,
that's fair. And then
we can
that
go up.
Case two, for the precedent piece, that does help the community overall for us to move other cases in the future forward. So I think that'll be a personal decision on your part, knowing kind of where we all are, what you would like to do. If you'd like to pause and add the condition, I would support that as well. I would also support it here. Again, with the condition, it allows precedence.
Other thoughts? I have some.
I just think if the applicant is willing to offer this now, let's put it on the record as a condition, take the condition, and as Commissioner Haver said, it kind of helps reinforce this Planning Commission's intent of having a variety of housing options for Raleigh citizens. So I would support deferring to the next meeting if the condition could be set in.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So we're trying to decide between deferring to the next meeting, so we have a condition that shows those 4 units at 80% AMI versus
Voting it out as is.
voting as is, and with the expectation that that is added in before it goes to council.
Or not, or the council they could just talk about it at the public hearing if they so choose. I don't think it would change, I don't think it could change between here and council, but I think.
It could not.
It could not, right. So I think, but in terms of the precedents too, continuing to encourage or require affordable housing be concentrated in this area is also, I think, a real concern that I have, so.
And if I may add, Commissioner Mann, you can certainly speak for yourself. I don't want to speak for you, but if the applicant wants to add it and they want to have the case deferred, I 100% support that. I also support voting it out as it is. My reason being, I am all for setting precedent, but we have allowed these other developers to come in and we've approved their rezonings without affordable housing. They didn't offer it, but we just let it go. So to have this gentleman, to have us say, we like for you to put this condition in to set a precedent. No, I want the big money developers to set the precedent. I don't want this gentleman right here who's trying to give back to his community to set the precedent. In my opinion, excuse me, I get emotional. In my opinion, you're already setting a precedent. You're giving back to your community. You're developing a housing type that is needed to serve the community that you live in, that you grew up in. I don't want to put any further conditions on you beyond the significant community benefit that you're already providing that we don't put on these out-of-town developers who come in here and build their $1 million products and tell us it's not feasible to include affordable housing, or they'll contribute $400 per unit to a fund, and we say, okay, approved. So I am fine. I just want the record to show moving this along with my thanks to you for considering adding this affordable housing condition when there's already an affordable housing community going in adjacent to your development. Thank you for doing that. I will support you doing that if that's what you want to do, but I will also support voting this out to council without that condition.
Amen.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
So I would say thank you, Commissioner Bennett. And I perhaps gave Mr. Hembrick some bad advice. I said, the Planning Commission, they're looking for something contributing to affordability. And we did the math, and he said, I think I can do that. And that's on him as something that he was willing to step up. And, he's a guy who does his duty. That's kind of he is. And so he's willing to do that. I mean, we'd love to be voted out today. And the challenge of getting the condition in is you have to go to council, close the public hearing, and then add not close it, but go to the public hearing and add it then.
You can amend before they schedule the public hearing.
Okay, so there is a little window before the hearing is, okay, so we could do it then, add it, and get it into the public hearing. So, yeah, I think we can do that.
I'd also say you could do that, or you could not. You could just choose to build it.
Yeah.
That way, without a rezoning
We could
condition.
we could get feedback from council and,
Right.
and then
And
be
council may want
responsive to
something different
council. So
altogether,
we
so-
we would have some flexibility there.
Right.
So-
Or truly, you could have no zoning condition and just decide to build
do it.
whatever type you decide to
Yeah.
build for the benefit of your community. I mean,
Yeah.
So thank you for everyone for their thoughts on that. But I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'm happy to make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated March 12th, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Could I make one more comment?
Yes.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being willing to create those conditions. Definitely agree with everything you said, Commissioner Bennett and Commissioner Mann, regarding this. But just since we're talking about precedent so much, I do try to be consistent on when we talk about big developers like the ones we just talked about in Glenwood South, what they put on site, what they contribute. And to stay consistent with that, I do want to say, while there is an affordable development just adjacent to this, I think in an ideal world, every new development has some kind of affordable units there in it. Obviously, here in reality, that's not the case yet. But for example, over off Glenwood, CASA is about to build a 100% affordable development. I don't think being a market rate development just adjacent to that 100% affordable one in that part of town, I don't think we should be let off the hook for that either, right? And obviously the applicant here is going to add this condition, so it's kind of a moot point. But I do want to say, just because there's a concentration of it in that part of town, I don't think 100% market rate projects should get different treatment just because of what's adjacent to them. I did want to put that on the record, but I do support what we're doing here.
Thank you. I expect that will come up as an item of debate in a future topic, in a future case then. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Mann has seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Moving on to rezoning case item F4. I'm sorry, new business item F4. An update to the BRT station area planning in the southern western corridors. And we will turn to Hannah Rackow for a presentation from the city's planning staff.
Given the hour, do you want to take this now? Or do you want, because you still have report of members?
We do.
Or just to the next meeting?
Without objection, I will like to push this item F4 to our next meeting instead of trying to sneak it in. And we will move on to approval of the minutes. Oh, I just wanted to double check. Is anyone here in the public here to speak on this update to the BRT station area plan? Well, then in that case, seeing none, I will defer this item to the next meeting. Thank you. Moving on to approval of the minutes. We have 2 batches of minutes today. Are there any comments on the minutes? Then seeing none, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Moving on to other business, report of the chair. I believe I have no reports today. Moving down the row.
Thanks, Chair Miller. Committee of the Whole, looks like we do not have any agenda items for the upcoming meeting, so I'm guessing we will meet in...
Probably will cancel. committee of the whole.
That's a first, so
We love it.
you're getting your time back. All right.
Thank you.
That's
Moving
all I
down
got.
the
Thanks.
line.
Text Change Committee meeting will meet on March 20th, 4 p.m. in this building, room 303. Looks like we have 3 items to hear. And also, can we check the membership listing on the, I'm looking at the Assistant Director's report, and I think this might be, like strategic planning, for example, looks like it might be the old membership.
I can revisit that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Haber.
No comment. Unfortunately, I'm not available due to a work conflict for text change on Wednesday, the 20th. Sorry.
Thank you. Moving down the line. Oh, do you want to do one right now? Commissioner Peeler, are you available for
Peeler,
text change?
Rains, Mann.
Let me look.
You will not? I will be. You will be. March 20th, Text Change Committee, will you be able to attend?
Can you remind us of the time?
March 20th at 4 p.m.
I can't make it.
Okay. If Commissioner Mann can, then we have quorum. Okay, we have quorum.
Thank you. In that vein, since Commissioner Fox is not here, the Strategic Planning Committee meeting will meet next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Just to do a quorum check, I am able to attend
When you say next Wednesday, you mean tomorrow, correct?
tomorrow.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes, I am available to attend. Are you?
I am. I have a competing conference call, but I will be here for this.
Great. So we will have a quorum with Roberta, potentially with Dwight. Our 5th is Roberta. I guess that's it. Yeah. Okay, we have 3. Okay, then moving down the line. Commissioner Peeler?
I don't have a report.
Thank you. Commissioner Mann?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Lampman?
Nothing to report?
All right. Thank you all very much. Moving on to report of the Assistant Director.
I don't have anything to add beyond what's published unless there are questions about council's action on the New Bern BRT rezoning.
Yes.
So in my report,
Yes.
sorry, the planning, the city council approved the rezoning in part. So what they took action on was to apply the TOD generally where it was proposed by Z92 22 with some exceptions. So they left out properties that have an existing NCOD designation. They left out state-owned property and any public requested removal from the rezoning request. They also rezoned 600 New Bern, the euphemistically, colloquially known as Exploris. They also rezoned Zach's, which is at the corner of New Bern and Raleigh Boulevard, and then also Duplex Village, both the privately owned and the publicly owned portions. And then they are intent on taking this up again on April 2nd. During their meeting, they indicated a desire to tour the area. So planning and development are working with the city manager's office to organize that sometime before April 2. And then also they sort of forecasted that they might talk about this for the next couple of months. Kind of want
Thank you. And just to-
to do small pieces.
Did they vote down the NCOD cases, or they're still just pending?
Just they didn't take action on those.
Okay.
They still could. They didn't vote decidedly to remove that per se.
Gotcha.
Just removed it from the discussion, not from
From the discussion that evening, yeah. So they could still take action there. I don't know what their intent is.
Thank you.
Can I ask, so the ones they did approve, and was that last Tuesday that happened?
It was the 5th.
The 5th. So, yeah, I didn't know either, but.
A lot of water has flowed since then.
Yeah. Same. What was I going to say? Oh, the heights in the parts they did approve, was it the same as where it was when
So
it was left with us?
They applied just the TOD with the exception of those sites that I named. And in those, so for Exploris, Saks, Duplex Village, they did make base district and height changes there. And they did remove the NCOD from the Exploris site.
And if I can ask one more clarifying question. So for the TOD that was approved, that TOD that overlapped on an NCOD, they took away the TOD?
Yes, that's right.
So
In
the
place where there was
NCODs
NCOD present, they did not map the TOD.
Okay, what about those sites that wanted to be part of the TOD that were under an NCOD?
They didn't add anything into the request into the rezoning based on requests. They only subtracted based on public input on the 5th.
So if it was in an NCOD, it was then removed from the rezoning?
From their action on the 5th. Their action was not, their action was all affirmative. There was no action to deny or remove anything from the request.
So they did not act on those items, but they still could.
From the conversation, not
Got it, so
from
the
the
TOD still is there no matter what, then? The TOD was approved then?
Just,
Over certain properties.
Over- right,
They did not
right.
vote on.
and was that just the westernmost third, or the whole, all
Whole
three?
corridor.
Okay.
But they did not vote on any NCOD parcels, other than the ones listed.
Yeah, they just didn't take action on on parcels with NCOD that had been included in Z92 to have the TOD applied.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one last thing real quick. I
Sure.
know we need to go, but I meant to bring this up earlier when I talked about text change. We had a lot of, maybe consternation is the word, about the process by which an individual can propose a change to an NCOD. Is that something that maybe we could request that council authorize a text change to change that process?
We could put that within the scope of our strategic planning committee study of issues we've seen with NCODs.
Okay.
And I would very much like to.
Could we add
Yeah.
that?
Got a comment too. I'm sorry, and this goes back to the Strickland Road case where we talked about the Falls Lake watershed. What is staff's view on employee recusal on stuff? I know, like, we have a duty to recuse ourselves, but say, for instance, with the gentleman who was a neighbor, and he is like the person on staff who's making most of the assertive comments. How do we deal with staff being accountable for recusing themselves in cases as well? Is that something that we've had to deal with before? I know it was a lot of personal opinions on things going on in that case, and I know there was a comment about Asheville and everything, so I just wanted to bring that up.
So in planning and development, typically we do not assign staff to work on requests that are near their home or where they have particular interest. I would need to look a little bit more closely at the Strickland item in particular. I don't know that, I just don't know the proximity for the staff member there. If that is, I heard that more as a expression of I know this area well, not as I have a particular interest in this. And I also think that sometimes when people speak from the podium and they say, I personally think, they really mean I professionally think. And so I don't know specifically that the rhetoric there was particularly accurate or not.
Yeah, no, it's just not from today. It's from the last two committee of the whole meetings, and this one too. I just got that feeling. So I just wanted to check and see what the stance was on not just us recusing
Yeah.
ourselves.
We do work hard to make sure that folks are not put in a position. I don't know if you all, I know you remember, we had that case on Roanoke Park, and we had transportation staff who lived in the area who asked not to be part of the discussion for that reason, right? Asked other colleagues in the transportation department to represent that item on their, because they would have been the natural person based on their subject matter expertise. So I think we are all actually pretty careful about that. But I can ask, I can look into that about Strickland.
Well, I appreciate the question and knowing that y'all do consider that. I may have been wrong, but I did hear a particular staff member on a couple of occasions, and I understood it that they lived in the area and they did have personal opinions, not professional. And so I could have totally misread that, and I do think that it is important when they stand at the podium that we try to be specific about not talking about how we feel and trying to make decisions on things. And so when you say tend to, or, I personally believe it is a little concerning, especially when we're walking such a tight line there. I mean, it is a really tight line, and I think everybody up here is super concerned about the environmental concerns. So anyways, I appreciate the comment and
I
knowing
hear
that y'all
you.
do that.
Thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Then with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
See.